Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into this week's edition of my top starts and sits. It's the championship week for most fantasy leagues, or you guys are trying to play some daily fantasy lineups this week and win yourself some money on this New Year's weekend. So hopefully that's what you guys are here for. With that being said, I'm gonna dive right into today's episode, giving you guys my top two starts and sits for the quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end position. So let's go ahead and dive into the most important position in football, as always, the quarterback spot. My top start of the week, I'm going with Justin Fields. The kid has obviously gotten better over the last couple months, and he's got a great matchup on paper. They're going against the Lions, who are giving up 23 points per game to to quarterbacks this year. That is the most across the NFL. Not only that, they're pretty bad at defending the run. And what does Justin do very well? Using his legs to pick up yards and first downs. So I can see him having at least 50 plus rushing yards in this game. I can see him getting to close to 200 passing yards and getting you 2 or 3 touchdowns. So if you were able to pick up Justin Fields off the waivers earlier this year and he's gotten you to the championship game, I think that he's going to help you guys win it and be one of your quarterbacks that you're going to want to select. But when we start drafting next off season, my other top start, this is a Thursday night game, so you're going to have to make this decision quickly. But I'm going to go with Dak Prescott against the Titans. He was able to overcome that bad matchup against the Eagles last week and put on a solid performance. And then he's got a great matchup this Thursday night against the Titans. They're giving up 19.9 points per game to quarterbacks this year. That is the third most allowed. He's my guy I'm going to have in my MVP spot in my FanDuel lineup when I put that together for tomorrow night. So yeah, Dak Prescott's got a great matchup. I'm going to talk about his wide receiver, so I don't want to go into too much depth with him. But yeah, he's an easy play this week. My sit, now I'm going to go ahead and this is what I've always said about these type of players. Joe Burrow against the Bills. Now, if you guys are in your championship week, for your redraft or dynasty league, Joe Burrow got you there. He got me to one of my championships. Yes, I'm playing Joe Burrow. But when you put your daily lineup together for this Monday night matchup, I would maybe consider not having Joe Burrow in the lineup. The Bills are only giving up 13.2 points per game to quarterbacks this year. That is the second fewest across the league. So with that being said, you're going to play Joe Burrow. You're going to have to temper your expectations for your championship game. But man, Joe Cool, he's the type of quarterback that potentially overcome it. But just understand you might not get the greatest performance out of Joe for your fantasy championship this week. And then, like I said, he's a name I would not want to have in any of my FanDuel or any of my, wherever you play, FanDuel, DraftKings, Underdog. He's a name I would look to avoid this week. My other sit, Derek Carr against the 49ers. I know because Derek he's been a decent streaming option at times, but this is not the week to stream him into your lineup if that's what you guys have been doing throughout the season. With that being said, the Niners are only giving up 13.3 points per game to quarterbacks this year. That is the third fewest allowed in the NFL. So yeah, with that being said, Niners got the best defense. I'm not trying to play really anybody against them, maybe outside of a Devontae Adams and maybe a Darren Waller in this matchup. With that being said, top starts and sits, Justin Fields against the Lions, Dak Prescott against the Titans, my sits, Joe Burrow against the Bills, and Derek Carr against the 49ers. Moving into the running back position, my top start of the week, I'm going with Travis Etienne Jr. against the Texans. Pretty simple. Texans have one of the worst rushing defenses in the NFL, and in terms of fantasy, that's what it lines up to. They're giving up 25.5 points per game to running backs this year. That is the most allowed to the position. With that being said, it's just Travis Etienne's backfield. He's getting all the volume of touches that you want to see from him, and he's got a great matchup. If you've been waiting for a ceiling performance out of Etienne, this is the game that's setting up perfectly for him to have that for you and help you win that championship this weekend. My other top starts, I'm going with Zonovan Knight, Bam Knight, however you guys want to call him, and Michael Carter against the Seahawks. The Seahawks are allowing 23.5 points per game to running backs this year. That is the second most allowed in the NFL. We got Mike White back in the lineup, so that should hopefully help keep this offense on the field and put themselves in positions to score touchdowns at the end of these drives. And that should also help benefit the receiving ability of like a Michael Carter and then even Zonovan Knight when they choose to use him in that aspect of the game. My sits, going back to that Raiders-Niners matchup, Josh Jacobs against the 49ers. As I've said, the Niners have the best defense in the NFL, and they're really stout against the run. They're only giving up 10.7 points per game. That's the fewest across the NFL. Now, as I always say, play the players I got you here. So you're probably going to have Josh Jacobs in your lineup. Just like I said about Joe Burrow, temper your expectations. He's likely going to have a floor game if he gets any closer to his ceiling games. That's just a benefit for you. But yeah, like I said though, if you're putting together your daily lineups, that's a name I would not want to have in my daily lineup this weekend. My other sits, I'm going with Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson Jr. against the Patriots. Both of them I think, yeah, Jeff Wilson got the touchdown, but both of them kind of underperformed in a good matchup against the Packers on Sunday. I know I was disappointed in Mostert's game because I needed him in a matchup that I lost to barely miss the championship game. With that being said, though, when you look at this matchup on paper and fantasy, the New England Patriots are only giving up 13.3 points per game to running backs. That's the second fewest amount. That's not a lot of points to go around if New England can hold that amount between Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert. So maybe you are stuck because in the league I just mentioned, I might have to play Mostert when I go to try to win my money back in that third place game because of the running back situation I've been dealing with all season in that league. But with that being said, if you can find a better option than Wilson Jr. or Mostert to play this week, I definitely would do that. With that being said, my starts at running back, Travis Etienne Jr. and Bam Knight and Michael Carter against the Seahawks. And then my sits, Josh Jacobs against the 49ers, and then Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson Jr. against the Patriots. Moving into the wide receiver position, my top starts and sits, going back to that Cowboys-Titans matchup that we have on Thursday night, CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup against the Titans. Titans are just very good against the run, but you can throw the ball against them, and they have a banged-up secondary right now. So I'm looking for Dak Prescott and these two wide receivers to take advantage of it. The Titans are giving up 26.6 points per game to wide receivers this year. That is the most allowed, so I can see them going off through the air in that Cowboys offense tomorrow night. My next top starts and sits, I'm going with Christian Watson and Allen Lazard against the Vikings. Now, do note that Watson left the last game with a hip injury. When I looked up the last report, they said he was day-to-day. So I will say this, if Watson is unavailable to go, then I would look either to a Randall Cobb or a Romeo Doubs as a sneaky play. I don't know if I'm necessarily picking those guys to play up in championship games, but I'm mentioning those names if you're putting together your daily lineups and you're looking for a cheap option. If Watson was to get ruled out for this game, I would consider playing those guys in my daily lineups. But with that being said, they're going against the Vikings. The Vikings are giving up 26 points per game to wide receivers this year. That is the third most allowed. So it's a great matchup. It's a game that these Packers have to win. You know they're going to want to put up a lot of points against the offense and the Vikings that can put up a lot of points. And I can definitely see this game getting into, even though it's in Green Bay in December. Well, yeah, I think actually be played on January 1st. So January, December, same thing. I know it's going to be cold weather, but they're going to have to put up a lot of points, I feel like. I feel like this is going to be like a first team to 30 points wins this game. So I want all types of fantasy players from those type of games. So yeah, Watson and Lazard are great plays this week. And like I said, if Watson gets ruled out and you're put together a daily lineup, you're looking for a cheap wide receiver to play, I would consider Romeo Doubs or Randall Cobb. My sit, this is a temper your expectation play because if you're in the championship game with DK Metcalf, he probably helped you get there. But DK Metcalf against the Jets, obviously they have a really tough secondary with Sauce Gardner. And with that being said, when you look at the matchup on as far as fantasy, they're only giving up 16.5 points per game. That is the second fewest allowed in the NFL. Now, I don't think Tyler Lockett is playing this week as far as I know of. And with that being said, if Tyler Lockett does indeed and miss this game as expected, they're going to be able to just double cover DK Metcalf throughout this game. So again, redraft dynasty, you're going to probably play DK for your championship game, but just temper your expectations. But as far as your daily lineups, he's a name I would look to avoid this weekend. And then sticking with that same matchup, I know people might be tempted to play Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore with Mike White back in the lineup. With that being said, he's coming off back after missing 2 games. Is he going to be any rusty in this game? And this game is played in Seattle, so they do have the 12-man crowd. But when you look at this matchup against the Seahawks are only giving up 17 points a game to wide receivers this year. That's the third fewest allowed in the NFL, and that's just because I think I said this last week. All the points for fantasy when you play the Seahawks, they're all going to the running back. And hint for my next section, the tight end position. So yeah, with that being said, my top starts are going to be CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup against the Titans, and Christian Watson and Allen Lazard against the Vikings. My sits, DK Metcalf against the Jets, and then Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore against the Seahawks. Let's go ahead and move into that tight end position that I just alluded to. Like I said, all the fantasy points they're going against the Seahawks are going to tight ends and running back. So sticking with that theme, my top start of the week is going to be Tyler Conklin against the Seahawks. Seahawks are allowing 12.1 points per game against tight ends this year. That's the most allowed. They are one of the 2 teams, with obviously the Cardinals as the only 2 teams giving up double-digit points to tight ends this year. Conklin has been a nice streaming option for people this year, and I think he's a guy that could be a very sneaky play if you've been streaming tight ends all the way to your championship week, and he's definitely a solid play, I believe, in daily lineups this week. Another sneaky play in a streaming option for you at tight end would be Cole Kmet against the Lions. Lions are giving up 9.2 points per game to tight ends this year. That is the 5th most allowed in the NFL. And then when you look at when these teams played each other just earlier in November, I think it was like November 12th or 13th, Cole Kmet had 4 receptions for 74 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game. So he had his ceiling type of performance. So based on what he did in a prior matchup and what it says on fantasy paper, I think Cole Kmet's a very solid streaming option at the tight end position. My sits of the week, I'm going with Dallas Goedert against the Saints. Now, I will say, he had the 3 receptions for 70 yards last week, so he was able to overcome a tough matchup. So he's going to be maybe temper your expectation play and redraft in dynasty leagues if you got Goedert, because he's that type of talent where you don't want to overthink the matchup. But as far as daily lineups, I would look to avoid him. They're going against the Saints this weekend. The Saints are only giving up 4 points a game to tight ends. That's the 2nd fewest across the NFL. Saints have actually been, over the last couple of years, one of those tougher defenses for tight ends to get fantasy production from. So again, if you got Goedert, I know he just came back last week, looked good last week. If you maybe have a better tight end or a tight end with a better matchup, I definitely would consider it. But if you end up playing him in your lineup, I get it, but just temper your expectations when you do that. My other sit is the rookie tight end from the Titans, Chigo Okonkwo against the Cowboys. I know he was really coming on over the last month, and then unfortunately the Ryan Tannehill injury definitely has impacted him. We saw this past weekend. I think he only had 1 or 2 catches. And so with that being said, there's just not the established chemistry for me to trust between Malik Willis and Chigo. And then when you look at the fantasy matchup, the Cowboys are only giving up 4.2 points per game to tight ends this year. That is the 3rd fewest allowed in the NFL. So between the Malik Willis being the quarterback right now and then the Cowboys being pretty stifled against tight ends in fantasy, I would not want to try to stream Chigo this week. So with that being said, my top starts, Tyler Conklin against the Seahawks, and then Cole Kmet against the Lions. My sits, Dallas Goedert against the Saints, and then Chigo Okonkwo against the Cowboys. So yeah, that is my starts and sits for championship week and any daily lineups this weekend. I hope you guys did enjoy this video. As always, make sure you do hit that like button. Also, make sure you do subscribe to my channel. So as this fantasy season ends, I will be doing different type of NFL content throughout the offseason. That is my plan. And then, of course, I'll be getting back into fantasy content as we get closer to the next season. So do make sure you hit the subscribe button. If you have any questions about players I did not mention, about starts and sits, get in my comment section. I'll reply to comments as soon as I see them. As a fair warning, later today I'm driving back to Tampa, Florida. So I'll be doing that over the next day and a half. So if I don't get back to you right away, that is the reason why. But I'll do my best to get back to any questions that you guys have, especially with Thursday night, the Thursday night game tomorrow night. And then as far as the next time you guys will see me, With it being championship week, I'm not doing no type of waiver wire or streamable defense next week, but I did decide I will do my top starts and sits combined with a streamable defense video. I will do that sometime either Thursday or Friday. I believe there are a pair of Saturday games that happened in the last week of the season. So I'm gonna do that either next Thursday or Friday. So anybody that maybe has been following me to use my starts and sits for daily lineups, I would like to do that for you guys next week. And then I do know there are fantasy leagues that do go into week 18. So just in case there are people out there that are playing in leagues like that, I'd like to help you go win that championship next week as well. So that will actually be the next time you see me, guys. Hope you guys have been enjoying the holiday last couple weeks of the year. I'll see you with my dad joke. See you guys next year. Peace out and go win that championship.